सर्वत्र गोविंद नाम संकीर्तनम गोविंदा गोविंदा सद्गुरु महाराज की कलये सुंदराकारं सदैक प्रियदर्शनम् अज्ञाननाशकं देवं सद्गुरुं मुरलीधरम् मुरलीमण्डित करकमलं मुनिजनमोहनं व्यत्यस्तपादं वनमालाधारिणम् प्रेम भक्त मंडल नित्य कीर्तितं प्रेमिक वरदम् आश्रयेऽहम् कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय हरये परमात्मने प्रणत क्लेशनाशाय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। नाम संकीर्तनं यस्य सर्व पाप प्रणाशनं प्रणामो दुःख शमनः तन्नमामि हरिं परम्। बुद्धिर्बलं यशो धैर्यं निर्भयत्वम् अरोगता अजाट्यं वाक्पटुत्वञ्च हनुमत्स्मरणात् भवेत्। सद्गुरु महाराज की। With humble pranams to our beloved Guru Maharaj, Maharanyam Sri Muralidhara Swamiji, and by invoking the grace of the beloved divine couple Madhuri Sakhi Samet Premika Varda Thakurji, we are in the right earnest exploring some of our concepts and some of our practical applications of intelligent living as ordained by our Guru Maharaj. The topics were all graced and blessed by our Guru Maharaj. We are trying within our lights, whatever we can understand, whatever we heard from our Swamiji, whatever we are practicing, whatever we discuss with others as friends, we are trying to explore these various concepts so that we can apply and maybe live a little more fulfilling, little more abundant, little more intelligent life using these concepts. And mostly we are referring to only our day-to-day events, our day-to-day problems, pretty much on the plane of our normal day-to-day mundane life, if you can use that word. And the spiritual part of it, we are dealing it during the weekdays. And generally, how do we lead our life better so that we are well prepared for spiritual progress is what we are exploring in the weekends. And we saw this wonderful dictum from our Bhagavatam, which is sort of a lighthouse for our maneuvering our endeavors in this choppy waters of samsaram. And our Bhagavatam very clearly says, thought determines the future. Bhavo hi bhavakaranam. And thoughts, we already saw, have 3-4 types of forms. And the most useful form for us is the intellect, which can observe, which can pay attention, which can chart the course properly, which can remind us, and which can rein in the mind, which can waver over times. And so the quality of our thinking determines the quality of our future on a normal level. And so how do we explore the possibility, how do we explore the capability of trying to make this thought process more effective, efficient, and intelligent is what we are trying to explore. And this is a lovely quote. I already quoted our Bhagavatam. This is another quote by a great artist, a genius in his own right. And he says, things which matter the most should never be at the mercy of things that matter the least. Things are very important for our lives. Things which matter the most for us should not be at the mercy of things that matter the least. Is that not intelligence? What matters most for us should not be dependent on or controlled by things which don't really matter, you see. And when I was in my corporate life, they call it as find out whose monkey it is. You get what I'm saying? Whose monkey? When somebody tries to throw a task at you, If it is very important for you, don't throw that monkey on somebody else. Take the monkey in your hand because it's important to you. That monkey should not be at the mercy of some other human. When I say monkey, I mean a task which is thrown at us. Something is sitting on our head. Suppose something is very important for me. They say, take the control of review, take the control of monitoring, take the control of follow-up, and take the control of action because it's important to you. If we don't take control of such activities in our hands, then we hope somebody else fulfills it. And the reverse is also true. If something is not very important to me and somebody is tossing that to me, I would want to toss it back to that person and say, yeah, it's important to you and I will help you. Our relationship is important. It's a second level importance to me. The task primarily is not important to me, but a person giving me a task, that relationship is very important to me. So I want to certainly support the task, but it need not be my monkey. Because for the other person, the task in itself is very important for that person. So what I do is, I tell that monkey, give it back respectfully to them and say, can you please call me in the evening? Which means I don't have my mind engaged on something which is not of primary importance to me. And I am allowing the other person to take control about the task which is of primary importance to the other person. I still want to help. So if the person forgets to call back, I don't have to feel guilty. If the person fails to follow up, then I realize that it was not important in the first place for that person. And I don't have to take that monkey on my head and call back that person and say, why didn't you ask me for this feedback? I've already done all this. What did you see that? That person will now be vexed. So it is not just trying to escape responsibility here. It is trying to understand what is important and what is important for me, what is important for the other person. Let me not try to control something which is of primary importance to the other person, which is in a way understanding what is my primary role versus a support role. If I am in a support function, I should not try to take all the controls in my hand. I rather give them support on a need basis. If they need the support, I am there. Many times I have seen myself, I ask somebody for an assistance and they say, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And they say, I will call you. You see, I will call you at 4 and I'll take care of it. No, what happens is, if that person is a peer who is as important, in the hierarchy of things, and they are not somebody who is reporting to me, then, or if he's a person above me, I need to set the expectation clear. And once you do that, you are very intelligent. What you do is, you said you will call me at 4. Can I just call you at 3:55? Just to make sure that we are on the same page, give you maybe 5 minutes to sort of review it, and then you can make your call. So I am actually designing in a control, even though a person who is as important, when I say important, as empowered or more empowered than me takes the control, I still want a small window of control there. I can't openly say, you don't call me, I will take care. It won't work. So I would set the expectation, can I call you at 3:55 to make sure that this call happens at 4? And the person will actually be happy if he's a sane person. Sure. So now I have my control. Otherwise, at 4 o'clock, I am hoping that person will call. Suppose that person is in a busy state and I have not built that expectation with that person. If I call at 4, I'll be dogging that person now. So the whole problem becomes, instead of me adding value to the relationship with all good intention, I am denting the relationship by trying to unnecessarily follow up on something when I have not set the expectation. So that's what he means practically. And I am also going to introduce an interesting principle I learned from two wonderful people, Indian Statistical Institute. I'm not trying to tell you the abbreviation, another danger, but it's called Indian Statistical Institute, you see. And they taught me a lovely principle, which is basically for statistics, but very useful for life. Once I saw an article where they have said, mathematics, unfortunately, has calculus as its peak. All your learning, right from counting to addition, subtraction, everything is taken to a peak in calculus, transforms, Fourier transforms, all that stuff. They said it would have been a lot better if whatever we are learning in mathematics peaks in statistics, because that's more day-to-day useful for all of us compared to calculus. Right now, I don't use integration to work my day-to-day life, you see. I don't use differentiation or integration to understand what is happening in my life, but I use statistics every day. I get manipulated by statistics. My decisions are made by unconscious statistical thinking in my head, which at times becomes very irrational, you see. And so here, the statistical experts, I will tell their names also. They came and taught me a principle which I'm going to explain, which is pretty close to this principle. And that clearly says what matters the most for us, which means it's very important, should not be under the mercy of things which matter the least. You see, then I have a problem. By design, I am now feeling helpless now. You see what I'm saying? So suppose somebody who is superior to me, I need some help from him, and that person has taken the monkey from me. Then I feel helpless. He is greater than me. What can I do? We can still do things. Where you set the expectation, sir, it's very important to me. So can I call you at 3:55 to make sure that we have the call at 4? And now you have taken the monkey. That person is expecting the call. Even when you call, the person is not surprised. So when a person is prepared, generally it's a psychology. If you prepare somebody, you have a better chance of a success of any transaction. If you suddenly put somebody in shock and suddenly surprise somebody, even if work is done, it leaves a very bad taste. So prepare. How do I prepare? I take the monkey on me. I call, say, sir, you don't have to bother. I will call you at 4. So I call at 4. And the person says, I'm sorry, I've not finished the job yet. Then I say, tell me, sir, when can I call you back? I'm sorry to really bother you, but tell me, when can I call you back? No, the person says, no, I will call you at 5:30. Then we agree at 5:30, sir, I'll wait for your call, or don't worry, I will call you. So still the monkey is in my hand, you see. And that's why you continue working with people so that what is important to you is not at the mercy of things which matter the least. You see. For that person, it is not an important task. For me, it is an important task. So every task which is important to me, I need to keep something in my hand to do the follow-up, so that I have the monkey a little bit of a trigger, because it's very important to me. And that's generally a good practice, an intelligent practice to do. Let us go back to our favorite stuff. We saw it last time, right? We saw that the results is Y, and it is attained with a system, and it is attained with some efforts, right? Now, this is what I expect. Let me work on this. This is what I expect from this equation. Suppose I find this is not happening, right? I find, even though I put my efforts, right? And I thought, this was pretty much taken care, and I don't get the results. What is the result of this is, we already saw, this was the need I have. Need can be expressed as, I put in an efforts and I expect a result from my efforts is also a need. Na? A need is, I have a view about how a problem can be solved. And to the best of my lights, I think this is what would solve a problem. And so I have a need for a resolution of a problem based on the efforts I put in. So when the need is not met, we already know, right? I can hear you all murmuring, yeah, feeling. Yeah, feeling. I get this feeling, I get this emotion, and that emotion is what is the result of my need for this equation is what I expected. And so obviously I get a feeling. And now we already saw how needs and feelings are linked. I think it was drilled very well in for the past about 14 weeks. And also in between, whenever we did the lectures for corporates or schools, we have put that as a clear thing. But then allow me to split that need into two so that we understand that all feelings may not be genuine. There is this feeling which is, can I use the word rational feeling, and there are what is called as irrational feelings, right? Shall we divide these two as rational feelings and irrational feelings? If you find the word irrational very strong, my apologies, call it not so rational feelings, which is irrational anyway. So I hope you don't have any irrational feelings when I'll call it irrational, right? Now I have an expectation and it is not met. Disappointment, sorrow, all that are pretty much rational feelings. But I had an expectation, it is not met. If that results in rage, sense of despondency, etc., it means somewhere in this feeling, I have sort of allowed a little bit of a contamination of irrationality in it. Everybody undergoes rational feelings. Nobody can ever be always happy, etc. Normal humans can never be there. We all know that. It will be irrational to think otherwise. But when the same feelings borders to extreme reaction in form of irrationality, rage, tremendous despondency, tremendous frustration, tremendous irritation, then there is a possibility that that same feeling has a rational part and an irrational part. While I cannot work around the rational part, it is inbuilt in nature, I can reduce the irrational part. I hope you are all with me, right? Because at times I react in an extreme way, which I realize later. சின்ன விஷயத்துக்கு போய் இவ்வளவு அப்செட் ஆனேன் அப்படின்னு தோணும் அப்புறம். But then I don't realize it then and there. So I need a prompter to show me if I am exceeding the Lakshman Rekha of rationality. Right? And the prompter is very, very simple. It is more simple than you think. Let me go back to this. Right? Let me go back. We are too early for this now. It won't be rational for me to do it right now. You have this. Oh, again, the whole thing comes. There is no eraser. Why is there? That's irrational fear. Okay. I'm trying to emulate it, but what to do? You see. Difficult to be irrational. Right? I'm getting there. So you have this, the feeling, and then there is rationality and irrationality. Where does this irrationality come, you think? Some things can't. Yeah, just take a swipe. Don't be upset about it. So here, irrationality comes from what I call as, it's very simple. You have an expectation, I call it X. And if that expectation gives rise to a small f, which is a normal feeling, plus an IF, irrational feeling, you see, then what happens is, obviously, this portion came from an irrational expectation, right or wrong? My expectation is sandwiched between rational expectations, which is very simply, I expected a result, it didn't happen. Rational expectation. Nobody can work without that expectation. Moodopi na pravartate. Even fools don't undertake an endeavor without expecting a result. So in expectations, if I have two parts of it, a rational part and an irrational part, obviously, when the expectation is not met, I may actually end up with a rational feeling, if I can use the word, and an irrational feeling added to that. Yes? Yeah. Now, what is this irrational expectations? We may consciously or unconsciously, deliberately or without any deliberation have. How do I discover, or how do I know, how can I be aware of an irrational expectation? Right? So expectation leads to feelings because expectation is a need. And generally some needs are expected needs, right? I expect this. And when the need is not met, I get feelings. This equation nobody can deny. In normal day-to-day life, nobody can deny. Needs leads to feelings. Now, when I am irrationally reacting to something, it logically, rationally tells me that this irrational feeling came from an irrational expectation. So far we are okay, right? Now we have to find out, what is this irrational expectation? If you know it, irrationality is gone now, then intelligence. What do you think? Can you all mull over a bit by the time I will rub this off? What can be my irrational expectation? What can be my irrational expectation which led me to an irrational portion of the feeling, right? And one thing is very clear, irrational expectations cannot be standalone. It pillion rides over a rational expectation, right? It has to. And that's what we call as a trigger for irrationality. If things are going well, unless we have a serious chemical imbalance in our brain, we neither have rational or irrational feelings about something when things are going our way. When things are not going our way, which means when the expectations are not met, that's when this irrational feeling seems to hitch an hike through this genuine feeling. So it comes together. And since it comes together, if we don't discriminate these two, when I say discriminate, English la romba periya problem. When I don't separate these two, I'll use a better word, isolate these two, then I have a problem. Because I look at a sum total, irrational feelings are trying to pass off as justifiable feelings along with rational feelings. Why? Because it's hitchhiking with it. So I need to draw a line to clearly differentiate rational feelings and irrational feelings. For that, I need to draw a line to understand what are my rational expectations and what are my irrational expectations. Is that okay? So now, what could be an irrational expectation? I put an effort, and that effort needed to give that results. But the efforts did not give rise to that result. Now, the rational expectation was, to the best of my knowledge, these efforts should have followed this equation to give me that result, right? But my irrational expectation is, we use this word, it ought to give me, it should result that way. It must be the way this should happen. Where I am freezing something when the whole world is in a flux, I am trying to bring in a rigidity of should, and all others are, children of should only. This should be the case. This is how it should happen. And this is how it ought to happen. Do you see the whole irrationality behind it? When I have taken the efforts to the best of my knowledge and I assume this is what is right? And clearly reality tells me it's not enough. Yet I hold on to my older worldview of things where I continue with that, this effort should give results. Why is it not? No. Along with the rationality of I expected a result, I've added an irrational element to the expectation. This ought to work. This should work. And now, when these two expectations go together, my feelings are no longer rational. My feelings become far more amplified than a normal rational feeling, because I am riding on an irrational expectation of should, must, ought to. And my feelings become very strong. That's when I feel very angry at the world, enraged. This is how this should happen. But it didn't happen. Nah? You see what I'm saying? That irrationality came because of the value which we have been drilled with called non-acceptance. I told you about a non-acceptance of the past. Should have, could have, would have, and but why? Eh? I'm sure you all remember. And now let me add one more element to it, which is an irrational element of non-acceptance, which is should. This is how things should happen. But it didn't. This is what I thought ought to have happened, but it didn't. Na? So which means instead of correcting or reworking this, I am not willing to give up this, which makes me feel very helpless, and that leads to a violent reaction of an irrational feeling. Does it make sense to you? A learning mind empties the cup constantly. Remember the empty the cup thing? But unfortunately, if you have an ice cube in the cup, you have to first melt the ice cube and then throw the water out. So here, when I am fixated on an equation like this, and I am not willing to work on this or this, because of course I need this. So I don't, this means I have to take major changes in my expectation of a result itself. Then that would mean changing my values, etc., purpose and all that. Let's not go there. That's a different thing altogether. Instead of saying maybe the X needs to work better, or F was a wrong assumption, that this is how these functions, you say, na? That's why it's called a function. Na? So the way it functions is not the way I thought it to be, would be a rational way to look at a Y is not equal to F of X. But an irrational way to think about it would be, Y should be equal to F of X. It's not working. It's unfair. The world is unfair. I am, others are unfair. You are unfair. Everything is unfair, including Bhagavan unfair, you see. And then it leads to a very strong irrational feeling. And that irrational feeling came from a rigid expectation of this is how it should happen here. This is how it ought to happen here. Instead of this is how it needs to happen. So how do I move around my F or X to adjust this equation so that next time my needs are being met? Now, do you see, just like how judging or evaluation, judging, na, what you did is wrong, what you did is right. That's one way of judging, right? The second way of judging is judging the process itself. Instead of just the results or instead of just the behaviors, we start thinking this is how it ought to happen or should happen. Makes us distract our eyes from the need, and now we are questioning what should happen, what ought to happen, but it's not happening. Instead of this is what needed to happen and it didn't happen, so let me start working on the function or the X to make sure that next time I get Y equals F of X right. The irrationality in expectation leads us to irrational feelings, which rides on rational feelings. And the mind can play tricks where it takes this as a package and tries to pass this through, justifies it by saying, this is what I expected, didn't happen. Obviously, anybody would have been very angry or enraged or frustrated or despondent or depressed. Why? Because I am not separating the rational part of the feeling, which is sorrow, which is disappointment, with a rage or a frustration. Unless you are very careful, the mind will pass it off like a package. Generally, when you want a lot of you need a signature of your boss, and there is a very difficult proposal which you somehow wants him to sign it, you generally slip it in with 5 leave applications. 6th one would be a major approval for, say, $5 million. So you'll be signing ding ding, and then because of the force of habit thana sign paiduvanga. So the mind has already made its decision to sign because of the muscle memory or whatever. And then the mind will start playing tricks. So how do I actually justify what I'm signing now? A trick. So the whole package, you slip in what is not rational along with the package of rational things and to somehow get the whole deal done. But we have to be careful. And that's where we have to be observant. That is my reaction commensurate? Is my feelings commensurate as an observer to what actually happened? And we all know deep inside, maybe there was overreaction. Why was there overreaction? Because I had an intense feeling about it. Why was there an intense feeling? Don't take it as a package now, separate it. Yes, it is natural for me to be sad or disappointed, but it is not natural for me to go to the edge, you see, of tremendous depression or tremendous despondency, or it can be anger also. Anger is always the heat, you see. So it's always, when unaccounted energy is there in mechanical systems, electrical systems, it's always dissipated as heat only. So and the energy again vardhan paathu you have to channelize it. Yeah. So that anger is generally heat, where it does not solve any problem, etc., and it only creates a muddle. So when we separate a genuine feeling from an feeling of irrational feeling, what happens is I get an idea. Where did this irrational feeling come from? Idella my observation. It happens to you and me. When I observe, I find that this expectation, if I can use it, empty slide, lovely. This expectation has a rational side and an irrational side, and that's a need. So I get a feeling which has a rational part and an irrational part. And so don't block it like this, don't block this like this, separate these two. This understandable, this needs to be avoided. And this is typically coming from ought to or should. That's why whenever people ask me a should question, it's not just semantics, but below that word should has a rigidity, which generally is not a good practice to nourish. It's like a poison ivy. So that's why whenever people say, what is this Bhagavata Dharma? What should I do? I say there are no shoulds in Bhagavata Dharma, only coulds. You could wake up in the morning, you could chant Maha Mantra, you can sukha, you could do Karagrevas, you can do a lot of things in Bhagavata Dharma. What should I do? No. There is no should. The moment I say should, no problem. It means you are not going to relish. If you don't relish what you do, then Bhagavad Dharma's whole intention is gone. So you can say, what do I need to do to become a better person? I'll tell you. When I say this is what you should do, it implies a conflict from outside. Or if I tell myself, I should do that now, why should I? I need to do it now. It is done out of understanding. If I have to tell myself, I should do it today, why am I kicking myself on this? Why can't I take a step back and say, this is what is the why? This is what I want to attain or achieve. Hence, I need to do this to get there. Na, is it not more empowering than trying to say, I should do it? It is not an end in itself. The end is, I have a goal. And who told me that goal? I created this goal. It is me who wants to go there. This is a why which I have decided. Why na? That's a basic need for me to be happy, etc. That's why I put that happiness. It keeps cropping every now and then. So here, once I am clear about this is my why, then there are no shoulds for me here or even from outside. There are only needs for me. I need to do this, or I can do this. Remember the 2 blocks, 2 doors? That's where I'm going to again. Where the moment I kick myself, I use this word called must do it. Why must I? You see this problem with the word must and should. It sounds very powerful, but it's only violent. At times, violence appears powerful, but there is no greater power than calmness and clarity. So when you actually say, I should do it today, right? Why should I? which means if I fail to do it today, I'm going to get the irrational feeling also in the end, which is more than just disappointment, frustration, personalization, self-blame. All these comes because I have sort of chosen an irrational expectation to ride along with a rational expectation. And yes, most of the times when we plan something, plans may not work. The moment I make it a should plan and a must plan, ought to plan, actually, I'm going to end up with a feeling which is unfortunately far greater than what that feeling of rational feeling which I needed to actually experience. I'm going to get something far greater. Who created all that now? I. But the mind won't say I, na? So it will find something or somebody to tag that irrational feeling on. That's how the blame game starts. You see. So the moment I'm clear about this, that instead of kicking myself with an ought, and instead of kicking myself with a must do it or I should do it, let me be clear about I have a need, and hence I need to do this. For example, I need to be healthy to be happy. I'm clear about this equation. But this is what is called as the primary need. And for that primary effort, I need what is called as a secondary effort, which means I need to do a daily walk so that I can become healthy. Okay. So that I can become healthy. So when I think I should walk daily, you shouldn't. You needn't. But if I need to be healthy so that I am happy, let me walk. Now I am not starting with an irrational expectation. I'm starting with a very rational. Idella rational than I'm starting with a clarity of why do I need to walk? Right? For being more healthy. And why do I need to be healthy? It adds to my happiness. That's my equation. If something is wrong, I can change my F for X later. But this is my current way of looking at the world, isn't it? So when I need to do this, what I do is when I am not feeling a little tired and I don't want to walk, instead of kicking myself, you should do it all the time. You're like that. Come on. Not for its own sake. Then I remind myself, I need to do this day in and day out. I have to eat thrice a day. I can't say, let me not eat today, let me not eat tomorrow. I'll say at the weekend, I will eat totally. It doesn't work that way. So this is how I see it. Even when I need a little more energy to do that, I now imagine my final state of this is what I need to be. And health is what is going to contribute to that state of happiness. So let me walk so that I can get to that state of health. Is that okay? So this is what is rational living. This is what is the way in which we set rational targets, where we don't lose sight of y equals f of x. And instead of just saying that I ought to do the daily walk, I tell myself I need to do it because it is going to relate to that happiness, which is very important for me. And happiness is because happiness is caused by good health. And for good health, I need to put small habits daily. Even if I'm not feeling very happy to walk for half an hour, let me at least go and mark an attendance and come back. You see, many times, this is what I have found. I don't have time for walking. Okay, let me wear my shoes. I have 5 minutes now. Let me wear my shoes outside, see the sun and come back in. If you take that step now, walking comes automatically. That's starting trouble. You see, that the biggest trouble we generally have is what is called as a starting trouble. And once you start, and instead of saying half an hour of walk, easiest intelligent way to start is all I shall do is to just wear my shoe. And yes, I don't feel very much like walking. I won't walk today. I will go outside, just look at the sun and come back. Guess what? You go up to the shoe and wear the shoe, you will walk. Other than trick. First step. Other than Ganapati Puja. You see. Because the first step is always generally a very difficult step. Once you take that, Then it's easy. Many times when you feel a little lazy to come out of the bed, you can say, I'll go back to sleep. But let me wake up, go to the bathroom, wash my face, then I will go back to sleep. You tell yourself that now. Once you go and start brushing, everything is taken. Now you don't feel like going back. You have to take that one step only, not the whole day. 24 hours you are getting out. 3 seconds of getting out of that bed. That is the only thing we need to practice. And that's what I believe are small habits. Where I say, okay, I want to sleep, I'll sleep. But let me go out and do it. When you are binge watching also, I shall binge watch. But I will just switch it off, go to the kitchen, drink some water and come back and see. You get that breathing space if you, to stop binge watching when you do that. When you take that one step of switching off, make it a little difficult. Put it under your drawer, lock it, keep the key somewhere. That's how you protect yourself. The Ulysses story, that's how you do it. Make it difficult for you. Because why is clear. You don't want to binge watch. For example, I'm saying, binge watch can be anything. Make that which is going to give you negative Y, that function, that X, make it very difficult. And say, I will make it a little difficult so that I get the chance and the time and the avakasam, they say, the space for me to take a decision not to do it. Most of the times you are very successful in that. Make it a little difficult. And things which are desirable, make it as easy possible. Right? Make it as easy possible. So here, the irrational part of it, as I said, is when we have an expectation which is laced with ought to, should, must, etc., without having this equation in mind. If you remember this equation, there is no must here. It is only needs. And remember this, F is also can be changed. X can be changed. And if Y is not working with the current F and X, find ways and means to make it better. And instead of saying Y equals F of X, if it's not happening, I'm going to get angry. It's going to be difficult. If not happening, I'm going to be despondent. It's going to be difficult. The whole world in Sanskritam is called Jagat. Jagat nale constant flux. You can't have constant equations in this Jagat. To get out of Jagat, there may be constant equations. But in Jagat, everything is changing. And we need to be adaptable. And adaptability comes in accepting a simple fact that nothing is written on stone. I need to be nimble. I need to actually look at what works now more than what used to work should work now. That's the whole problem now. Then what results is an expectation which is irrational. And obviously, when an expectation is irrational, I would guess the feelings that ensue when the expectation is not met, the rational part of it gets a rational feeling. The irrational part of it will get the irrational feeling. Unfortunately, unless you're very observant, these two pass off together as a justifiable rational reaction. And if you're not observant, we will start justifying it. And for me to justify what I did, somebody has to take the hit. When it is a zero-sum game, and then what happens is somebody else get the blame. And then I carefully build that blame, you see. And then I start looking things not in a rational. So remember this, a simple thing should, instead of that, try to make it need. And there is, whenever, many times we are angry because things don't happen the way it happens around us. I'm in an office, I have some expectations not met. Then if I go from an irrational expectation viewpoint, what happens is, generally I get my work done, but then I dent a relationship. I get my work done, but then there are also people who can be passively aggressive, where they smile at your face but plot your kuri later. So you will never know what are the kuris which have been people tondi badrama vechirupanga, you see. And so when you are in the mindset of a need instead of must, should, ought to, when you actually ask a person to get something done as a request, when you are in a need mindset, the request is properly done. because a need would always have a consequence as its extension. I need this because this is what is expected here. But an ought to cannot think of consequences. It's just the way it is. That even if you request can be heard as a demand. And depending on that person's maturity, it can become even murkier. You see what I'm saying? So if we are in this mode of y equals f of x, I am clear why do I request x is because I expect a y. If it doesn't work that way, then I try to tweak around my f or x to make sure that let me try it this way now. It's a journey, and it's always a creativity is what life is interesting about. How do I make that work this way? How do I make it fun? How do I make it easy for the other person to accept my request? Yeah. How do I make it easy? I have to do a little more homework. Do you get what I'm saying? When we are in the state of intelligent living, whether it is parenting or whether it is interspousing or whatever, what happens is when I want something from the other, and if I'm clear about this is my need from the other because this is what I expect as an important value for me, could be all leads to happiness finally. And this is what is finally going to add to my happiness. Then when I am requesting something, I'm going to have the consequence in my head and tell them that if you do this, I'll be very happy because this is what I expect from that. And if I want to get it really done from others, now I do my homework. For example, I'll give you an example. How do I make it easy for a person to say yes to me? If you think that way, then you are a very intelligent person. The example was, we needed all our suppliers to follow a system, right? And it was given as a guideline from our office here, somewhere in America. This is how suppliers should follow. Now, the easiest way is courier. I get this, do it. But that won't work now. Even if it works, it will not work because it won't work effectively because I have got something I've just told. Our son, he told me. So I'm doing all this certification, etc. will become a paper exercise. So now, as a team, what we decided was we asked this question. This is what we need from a supplier. How do we sell the need as their need? It is our need. And our na, it's both you and me. Na? But right now, if I just hand it out to that person, it will just be Ram needs it, so we'll do it. How do we make it our need? Which means I need to do a little homework. I need to first show them the consequence. The positive consequence if it is put in place, a negative consequence if it is not put in place, as their own balance sheet, you see, as their own value and a need system. Secondly, how do I simplify it so that they understand it and apply it without much sweat? So I do that also, if I can. So I make it easy for them to say an yes to me. And so we made forms, we did training programs, etc. We did a lot of heavy lifting so that I get what I want from that person. Likewise, when you expect something and it's not happened, if I have irrational expectations, it would be ought to, it would be must, should, instead of this is the need. This is not just my need, it's our need. Can we do it this way? And this is the consequence. And I can also make it easy. If my need and result is clear, not only do I look at the need door of it, I also look at the possibility door. And when I look at the possibility door of trying to get a problem out of this room, I shall actually work a little bit as a homework by telling them, maybe you can try this, or maybe we can do this, so that it is easy for the other person to say an yes to my need. You see what I'm saying? That's where forms come into play. When you want to open an account in the bank, you take it for granted to fill forms around. But it was not the way it used to be earlier. You have to write a letter. And then the letter will go, you missed this, fill it and come back. So that person filled that, oh, address la pin code, fill it and come back. So now banks thought later, I'm talking about 100 years back. Then they thought, if we can clearly tell the expectations and make a form out of it, they will not miss anything now. So they made a form. The whole idea of a form, which we take it for granted now, you have a Google form, you have a physical form, etc. You understand the idea behind it? Idea behind is, I need this from you, but you are respected as a customer. How do I make life easy for you so that you can fill it without mistakes and fill it easily? So I put a name, address, pin code, a zip code, or whatever, and signature in a block. You see, it was not like that now, 120 years back. So what we take for granted has tremendous intelligence built behind it. We can learn from that. And the intelligence is, I will make it easy for you to say yes to me. And I will make it in a way that you won't make any mistakes, so that you don't feel bad. Generally, people don't like to correct now. Then they feel bad. And then they say, boda. So make it in such a way that people cannot make a mistake. Make it what you call pokayok, you see. And that is what is intelligence. When we can somehow integrate that in our interactions with people. How do I ensure that my expectations are understood? How do I ensure that my expectations are not irrational? How do I tweak with Y and with F and X and to make sure that I don't have any irrational expectations? How do I learn? Learning in motion, it's called. You see, I am not a learned person. I'm learning now. So what used to work with Gen X may not work with Gen Z. What is working right now won't work for Zen whatever. You see, the next Zen. It won't work for them. So I need to be nimble. I need to understand. I need to understand the language. I need to understand how you need to put things forth. Because you can't say this ought to work. It doesn't. Na? So I need to work around my function. I need to work around my efforts to make sure that I am adapting it to what is here. And that is the beauty of rational expectations. And that is the beauty of being very observant in our own expectations. Catch yourself apart from could have, should have, would have. Should this ought to work that way. It's not worked. So ought to is wrong, first of all, because it didn't work. So basically, rationality says, don't fight with facts, right? Build your model around facts. If the physics, science, everything works if you work model around facts. And if I have a theory which does not augur well with the facts, obviously I have to get rid of the theory and rework my theory. Irrationality says, I don't care about what happened. This is how it should work. I have a problem there. You see, that's what is called irrational. And it may sound very far-fetched, but to observe a little bit. Unless we are very observant, all these irrational expectations is abound in most of us. We need to be a little careful. And irrational expectations obviously lead to irrational feelings. Right? So I read something very interesting that thankfully it's working now. Right. And let me not get there right now. Let me go back here. This is a good starting point. No, even this is better than that. Here, when we say irrational, oh my God. I think it's going to be very successful soon. All right. Let me go back and do something simple. Right? This should work. Good. This is a model proposed by a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist, but I also believe that you don't have to be a certified culinary expert to cook your own meal. You see, you don't need a degree in cooking or whatever they call it, catering technology, to cook something when you're hungry. If some cuisine makes sense, I can very well cook in my home, right? But so don't ask me about these theories and all that, but I like the concept. It's called ABC. When you see an action, A stands for action. And C obviously stands for wrong, consequence. And B stands for belief. Now, irrationality demands that I don't have anything in between. Action leads to consequence, finish. Then I'm bypassing a critical step which can help me to be more intelligent, where I can actually relook at my belief system and ask, is there anything I'm missing in this? I've assumed this action leads to this consequence. And I've bypassed an important part of it, which is the equation that F of something is there, na? An unbelief. So X is the action, Y is the consequence. And the F portion is the belief, which is my way of constructing. I do this, I get this. I do this, I get this. Doing this is X, getting that is Y. And I forget there is something called a function which may not be properly understood by me. It's called my belief system. So there is a chance that an action can lead to a consequence depending on my belief system. Which means if I change this a little bit, the same action can actually lead to a different consequence for me in my psyche, in my way I look at it, you see. So I've seen this. I think it was, whom do I say here? Emerson. Things that happen around us does not create any impact on us. It is our reaction to what happens around us which creates an impact on us, which means our reaction or our response decides the actual feeling, emotion, and the consequence. But if we are irrational, we forget to even relook at our own belief system, where we, instead of thinking, am I looking at it the right way? Is there a rational way to understand this better so that I can put the different action consequence type of a model? And the belief system can be changed, you see, if you are open. And the way I believe things need to happen can be influenced, changed, adapted, etc. So most of these models, which people use to help people to become a stronger minded person or to make the strength of the mind well established, is they say actions don't lead to consequences. You also have a look at your belief system a bit. Try to see if you can work around this. Once you work around that, then possibly the same action need not have the same consequence to you, you see. And for me, what we already covered in the many weeks, this belief system with acceptance as one of the values can dramatically change this. It can dramatically reduce our sense of helplessness. It can dramatically reduce our sense of frustration, etc. And that is the reason why, remember, any action naturally does not lead to consequence. There is a B in between, which is my belief system. I can alter that. And when you alter that radically, it is called spirituality, where anything which happens around you, you can merely be a witness now. That's a radical change in the belief system. Why I'm telling you that is, it works even to the limits is what I'm saying. When you totally forget the B, that's when you become a victim, where anything which happens around me, instead of me even thinking that I can influence it in some way or the other, becomes a source of agony, becomes a source of persecution to me. And then I forget the total B there. That's the other side of the spectrum. If you look at those well-adapted, really intelligent humans whom we call saints, sages, etc., they have completely modeled their belief system in such a way that any action around them does not create a ripple. And they are not inert. They have understood their belief system. And they know how to work around that, you see. And so always we have this wonderful intermediate step between any act or action and its consequence, we can use our belief system to actually influence this consequence to be more productive or less invasive to our peace, etc. And we can work around our belief system. If you want one such system, we already showed it to you. That's the system of acceptance. And today we explored one more, which is the system of be watching our expectations, checking if our belief system has irrationality of should, ought to, and must. You see? Then we can relook at the whole. You see what I'm saying? That's the ABC of rationality. And now let's go to this lovely rule which was taught to me by two wonderful statisticians. His first one's name was Dr. C.Y. Krishnamurthy. He was one of the top statisticians of Chennai Indian Statistical Institute. And the other person's name was Dr. V.V. Iyer. And he was also, both were excellent teachers. So we were absolutely zero in statistics. That's why I said, instead of, the math leading us to statistics would be very useful to us for our life also, because statistics makes a lot of sense. And one such rule, I'm going to tell you how to make sense out of it. It's called the 80-20 rule. Have you heard about the 80-20 rule? Some people said, I aim for 80%, I got 20%, always happens. And what happens is ruler. So that's not the 80-20 rule. 80-20 rule was, believe it or not, is at least 150 years old. It originated in Italy by a person called Wilfred Pareto. This chap was an economist, and he was tasked with trying to find out the division of wealth among the people in Italy. And he found something very interesting, which happened to be as universal as this curve. You know about this curve, isn't it? There is this curve called, it's called the bell-shaped curve or a normal curve. Most of the things in the world follow that pattern, it seems. Let me not go to statistics here. But this 80-20 rule, what he found out was very interesting. He found 80% of the wealth was concentrated with only 20% of the people. So if there are 100 people, and the wealth of Italy at that time was, say, $100 million, he found out that $80 million was concentrated with only 20 people. Remaining 80 people, or make it 80 lakhs, 100 lakh people, 20 lakh people controlled $80 million, and 80 lakh people controlled only $20 million. And he found it very interesting. And he started then looking around for such patterns in other things. And he found out to be pretty much closely a universal rule. And he taught me this. Then we were all in supply development. So he asked us, can you apply this rule in your function? And this is the rule. Let me show you the rule so that we understand. This is the 80-20 rule. That smaller black blocks is the 20. The bigger black box is 80. And the bigger gray box is 80. Smaller gray box is 20. And now I'm going to bring in you this, which means 80% of Y is contributed by 20% of an X. And 80% of my efforts result in only 20% of the result. So every effort does not contribute equally to the result. That we all know. But the extent of imbalance would shock us. And so he asked us, can you try? So we all went back. And then we had a supplier base. We have about 400 suppliers, you see. And we have supplier problems. There are some suppliers who don't give us good parts, defective parts. We started mapping. If I have 100 defective parts, how much of this 100 were contributed by how many suppliers? Believe it or not, 75% of my problem came from 25% of the suppliers. 25% of the problem came from 75% of my suppliers. Now, if I treat all my suppliers alike, I am not an intelligent person, because I need to look at what leads to the maximum yield. I have limited attention. I have limited time. I have limited energy. Where should I focus this to maximize what I really want from life? You see? And this is what actually we found with my suppliers, that 80% of my results came from, 20% of my results came from 80% of the efforts. And the remaining 80% of my results came from 20% of the efforts. So if I am a very intelligent person, what would I do? Would I continue working as if all these 100 were alike? Or would I continue working on focusing and expanding this 20 a little bit? Would expand this so much? You understand what I'm saying? Vital few versus trivial many is how you put it in English. The statistics is 80-20. English is there are vital few contributors to a great result, and there are trivial many which contributes to only a trivial result. Few contributes to your vital part of what you seek in life, and trivial part of what you seek in life is contributed by many. You understand what I'm saying? We don't want to run our charity as a business, but I did it in an Indian charity. Somebody wanted my help, and I found out 80% of the donors contributed to 20% of the donation. 20% of the donors contributed to 80% of our donation. But as a principle, everybody is seen alike only because it's a charity. But the fact remains so. You see what I'm saying? And this rule is so mind-boggling that all of us were like obsessed with it. We started looking at 80-20 everywhere. If you see the same thing, look at COVID also if you want to. I bet that if you take all the 50 states, try doing it, you have the chart, somewhere around 80% of the cases would come from 20% of your states, which means 10 states would actually contribute to 80% of the COVID cases. Remaining 40 states will contribute only to 20% of the COVID cases. I'm confident about it. Maybe plus or minus 5%, because that's a universal rule, 80-20. You see. And how do I use this rule for my intelligent living? The possibilities are endless. If I have 100 friends, 80 of them contributes to only 20% of my happiness of having a good relationship. That 20% of my friends are going to contribute to 80% of my happiness. So if I'm an intelligent person, I would want to spend as much time with the 20% more so that I get more out of it instead of wasting my time the other 80. You see what I'm saying? Vital few, trivial many. Don't treat them alike. The worst form of inequality is to seeing unequal things equal. Intelligence tells us, look at your 80-20. You see, and it is ubiquitous, as I said. You tell me a case, I will show you 80-20 there. 80% of accidents are typically caused by 20% of the motorcyclists. And remaining 80% of the motorcyclists would have caused only 20% of the accidents. And same for our day-to-day life also. Suppose you have 24 hours and you get something out of the 24 hours as happiness. I bet, forget the 8 hours of sleep. Okay, 12 hours of sleep. You still have 12 hours left. I would assure you, 20% of the 12 hours would have contributed to 80% of your fulfillment of that day. And that is the golden rule. Plus or minus 5. Don't worry about it. But that's the whole idea is vital few, trivial. And if I am an intelligent person, I need to look at my relationships, my tasks, my plans, and all those, wherever there is a y equals f of x for me, 80-20 will come into play. I would start focusing on my vital few. Instead of wasting my time on the trivial many, what are the vital few relationships I want to cherish? Let me spend more time, not take it for granted. If you like talking to your parents the best, spend more time. That's my vital few, which contributes to 80% of my joy. Why should I underplay that? Things which matter the most should not be under the mercy of things which matter the least. You see, that joy which I get from friendships and interactions, etc., is important to me. It should not be in the mercy of this. It's not important for me. It contributes only 20% here. Let me actually design my day, put a schedule in such a way I understand 80-20 rule. 80% of my regular habits contribute only 20% of my success as a human being, whatever I design. 20% of vital habits contributes to 80% of my wellness, whether physical or mental or spiritual. Focus on the vital few, which contributes to the vitality of me. And there are many which is trivial. Don't waste your time there. Once you are clear about 80-20 rule, even managing time becomes very easy. Then you suddenly find I have a lot of time because I focus my 20% of my efforts. I understand which 20% is going to contribute the most. And then I'll focus more on the 20% and reduce my 80. I can't do away with 80, but I will reduce so that even a little here is going to bring tremendous improvement here. The same, let me put it in blue. If I do this here, it is going to improve only this much here. You see, the same quantum, this and the red and blue are same, but the result are going to be very difficult. If you are intelligent, put in where it's going to give us the maximum return. Is that not a simple logic for us to follow? It is true for relationships. It's true for our habits. It's true for our diet. It's true for our day-to-day schedule. It's true for everything, especially true for time, you see. And that is why when we want to strengthen our mind, try to find out what are the vital few practices I need to do, which makes the more best difference in my mind. And then practice that more. And reduce the, take the time from trivial many because you are clear now. And trivial many will always pause as ought to. Question that. That belief system is wrong. Why should I do that? I need this. And even if it's ought to, I'm going to get out of that irrationality. Let me do what I need to, not what I ought to. And so here, 80-20 rule is an exciting rule for us to understand. How do I differentiate the vital few and put all my focus on it so that I can reduce my energy, efforts, time, and attention on the trivial many, which is not going to anyway get me much of a result. You think about it. If you are a professional, I'm sure 80% of your employees contribute to 20% of the real value addition. And the remaining 20% contributes to the 80% of your value addition. So where do you want to put your bets on? Where do you want to focus your attention on? If you understand the rule and start applying, you're going to upset it, obviously. You see, you're going to actually put more focus on the 20, and of course, the whole equation changes. Left it to default, this is what we can expect from any equation, y equals f of x. Lovely rule, isn't it, in statistics and economics? But it's very useful for us. And if we are very clear about this rule, then we also find we are no longer helpless. We are clear about what contributes to my wellness. I shall focus more on it. And things which don't contribute to my wellness, I can reduce my attention, delegate, give it to somebody else. You see. And if a good example I found out, which works well for me, is with due respect to all those wonderful authors of the West, okay, and with due respect to their tremendous research and data presentation, coming from where I come from, I'm not talking about India or Sanatana Dharma. This is my own field of experience. If something makes sense to me and it augurs well with my experience, I don't want this burden of proof at all. If people tell me y equals f of x, focus on the efforts. Don't focus too much on the result. If you are passionate about the efforts and give all your energy, you actually are more healthy. You actually have a better chance of success. Now, I don't need the burden of proof from schools, from governments, from happiness index. I don't want. So instead of pouring through a 300 pages book, I found out I need the vital few from the 8-page summary of that book. The remaining 292 pages of trivial many is unimportant to me. So the best way to use it is what most of those people use now, the funnel rule. If at all you want to go deep into something, explore summaries of a lot of stuff. And if something is very interesting and something is very intriguing, maybe you can go and do what is called a skim reading. Skim reading na enna நம்ம சாஸ்திரம் உபக்கமம் உபசம்ஹாரம். And what is repeated, you just quickly see. What is illustrated, you see. What is illustrated as an anecdote, you see. You get the essence of the book. You don't have to go through cover to cover. We don't have the time or energy to do that. You can do what is called a skim reading. And the best way to do that is you delegate it. Somebody has already done a summary. Take that summary and get on with it. If you are more interested, you can expand it. 80-20 even works there. 80% of a book typically is trivial. The 20% has the lovely concepts, you see. And so all I need is the 20%. So summaries are very beautiful. Reviews are very beautiful. Introduction to a book is very beautiful. And the content index, etc., see how much is useful to you. Just because we